The perfectionism trap that guarantees you quit. Neuroscience of fear. Perfectionism isn't a personality quirk. It's a fear program that guarantees you quit right before it counts. If your projects die at 80%, that's not laziness. That's your nervous system pulling the plug. Today, I'll show you the neuroscience behind that quit code and give you a step-by-step system to rewire it. We'll expose 3 perfectionist lies, map the brain circuits driving them, and install an anti-fragile output method with a daily 30-10-1 protocol you can run today. This isn't about willpower. I've seen the same pattern in high achievers. Let's expose the trap so it stops running your life. The problem, the perfectionist paradox. Here's the paradox. High standards should push you forward, but when the stakes feel identity level, your competence, your reputation, those same standards flip into avoidance. The thing most people miss is the subtle trade underneath. Your brain quietly swaps progress for safety and sells it as quality. It feels responsible. It looks professional, but it's a stall. Underneath the surface, this is about self-worth protection. When work becomes a proxy for worth, if this is flawed, I am flawed. Your system prioritizes image defense over information gain. That identity fusion is what makes small mistakes feel existential. You're not guarding quality, you're guarding belonging. That's why relief floods the body when you delay. It's not about the task, it's about preserving who you think you are in other people's eyes. The pattern shows up the same way. You overplan to feel in control. You delay to gather just one more input. You tinker because it reduces uncertainty. Then, right before exposure, when your work meets reality, you bail. You rename quitting as not ready yet. Your brain rewards you with relief, and that relief is the reinforcement loop. If you've ever felt the wave of calm after deciding to push a deadline, that's the lesson your nervous system learns. Escape equals safety. And once the relief hits, your brain encodes it. Quitting starts to feel smart. The cost is brutal. Lost momentum, identity erosion, and a learned association that shipping equals danger. Now here's where most people mess up. They try to solve this with more planning. More planning reduces ambiguity, which lowers anxiety temporarily. But it doesn't raise performance, because performance requires contact with reality. So you get a comfortable illusion, tools, templates, and color-coded timelines that look like progress. Your dopamine system gives you a nice job nod for planning, while your actual project sits untouched. This clicked for me when I watched a client spend 2 weeks building a flawless research brief and 0 days on the first draft. When I asked why, they said, "The draft feels risky, the brief is safe." Exactly. The brain's threat detector treats exposure as danger and gives you a safer proxy task to hide in. The longer you avoid, the scarier the exposure becomes. That fear compounds like interest. Let me show you the shortcut nobody teaches. Perfectionism isn't about higher standards, it's about narrower safety. The window of what feels safe enough to ship gets smaller and smaller until perfect is the only option that doesn't trigger alarm. That's not excellence, that's a shrinking life. Once you nail that insight, everything else clicks. You see the tells? I just need a better system. I'll start when I'm clear. I'm waiting for feedback before I draft. Those aren't logistics, they're protective maneuvers. And the cost isn't just one missed deadline, it's identity drift. Every avoidance move is a vote for I'm the kind of person who doesn't finish. That's how confidence erodes, not from a single failure, but from tiny breaks in self-trust. Now here's where the trap tightens. Quitting feels like relief. Relief feels good. Your brain starts predicting that shipping will feel bad and quitting will feel good. So at 80% complete, when the real stakes show up, your nervous system cues doubt, perfection checks, and just one more pass. If you cave, you get that relief hit. Behavior rewarded is behavior repeated. That's the quit code firing automatically. Actually, let me back up and say this even more clearly. If it feels good to quit, your fear circuit is running the show. That means your effort becomes fragile. It works only when everything is under control and hidden. The moment reality enters, deadlines, feedback, visibility, the structure collapses. You learn to protect your self-image instead of building skill. That's why you can be insanely capable and still stuck. Quick reframe, this is learned protection, not a personality flaw. Your nervous system linked exposure with identity threat, so it does its job, avoid the pain. When you see it as training, not truth, you can install new training. That's the whole point of the small, repeated exposures we're about to run. Before we continue, you need to understand the cost of keeping this pattern. It robs you of compounding. Small shipped things stack into leverage, skill, reputation, opportunity. But when you delay for polish, you lose cycles. You don't just lose time, you lose data. No feedback, no iteration, no improvement. Binary thinking, perfect or garbage, blocks the middle zone where real growth happens. The game changer nobody talks about is emotional safety. Without it, productivity hacks won't stick. You'll have sprints of intensity, then collapse the second scrutiny appears. That's not a willpower problem, it's biology doing its job a little too well. So what do? We expose the mechanism. We'll map the fear circuit that flags social evaluation as danger, explain why overplanning soothes but sabotages, and replace the binary, perfect vs trash, frame with gradients that let you iterate. And we'll do it in a way that creates safety while raising output. Now you might be thinking, but I don't want to lower my standards. Good, you don't have to. You separate standards from sequence. You aim for excellence across iterations, not in one heroic pass. If you remember nothing else, remember this: quality comes from reps, not ideals. Next, I'll show you why your current approach fails even when you're disciplined, and how to stop your brain from cashing out at 80% without sacrificing standards. Why your current approach fails. Most perfectionists double down on planning. It feels smart because prediction calms anxiety. But here's the thing most people miss: prediction reduces uncertainty, not error. You get the comfort of knowing what might happen without any contact with what will. So planning scales certainty while performance stays flat. That gap is why you feel exhausted before you even start. Let me show you exactly how this backfires. When you plan, your brain gets a clean, controllable world. No messy feedback, no risk. That triggers a small reward. Nice job, we're on it, which reinforces more planning. But execution is where noise lives. The minute reality diverges from your plan, stress spikes. Instead of adapting, you overcorrect by making a new plan. That loop feels productive. It's actually avoidance wearing a blazer. Now about motivation and willpower. Relying on motivation creates wild variance. Some days you feel fearless, others you're fried. Willpower is a short-term bridge, not a system. When pressure rises, your effort collapses because it was never stabilized by ritual and safeguards. This is why your good weeks don't compound. You're not inconsistent because you're lazy, you're inconsistent because your power source is volatile. Binary thinking makes this worse. If your internal scoreboard says perfect or garbage, you'll only start when you think perfect is possible. That means you delay until conditions look safe, then rush, and then judge the rushed output as proof you're not ready. The thing most people miss is that quality is an average across iterations. If you only take one shot, the average is the shot. That's a fragile bet. Using shame as fuel is the hidden saboteur. Shame can spark a sprint, but it can't sustain a season. Under scrutiny, shame-driven effort turns brittle. One tough comment and the whole structure cracks. You don't review the work, you indict the self. So you either overwork to outrun judgment or underdeliver to avoid it. Both paths burn trust. And yes, your brain remembers that pain, so it will push you back to planning where judgment can't reach you. Productivity hacks without emotional safety don't stick. A new app, a 2-hour block, a color-coded board, these are amplifiers, not foundations. If exposure feels dangerous, you'll use those tools to refine the cocoon. You'll get faster at preparing, not better at shipping. The result is sophisticated procrastination. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches. You can't outschedule a fear circuit. You have to change the relationship between uncertainty and action. That starts with seeing why your current tactics soothe but sabotage. Planning is helpful up to the point it increases contact with reality. Beyond that, it becomes a hedge against feeling. Willpower helps for the first rep. Systems take over for the remaining 99. Standards matter, but perfect first kills the reps that create excellence later. Let me make this practical. If your plan doesn't specify when the first rough exposure happens, it's an anxiety plan, not a performance plan. If your motivation strategy doesn't include a floor, what you do on low-energy days, it's a hope strategy. If your standards aren't broken into levels, minimum viable, version 1, version 2, you've built a cliff, not steps. And if your review process evaluates you instead of the artifact, you'll avoid the review. Common mistakes I see all the time. adding scope instead of adding iterations, rewriting briefs to delay drafts, seeking pre-feedback to avoid post-feedback, and swapping high-friction starts for low-friction tweaks. Quick fixes. Lock scope, set a non-negotiable ship time, demand one piece of external signal per cycle, and log decisions separately from identity. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Your current approach optimizes for certainty, not learning. That's why it fails under real conditions. We're going to flip it, so execution creates safety, not just risk. Next, I'll show you the actual fear circuit so you can spot the moment it hijacks you and interrupt it on command. The neuroscience, fear circuits that drive perfectionism. So what is this circuit that cashes you out at 80%? Start with threat detection. Your amygdala scans for danger, especially social evaluation. According to leading researchers, it's not a fear center that creates the feeling of fear. It rapidly detects threat cues and kicks your body into a defensive state. That means faster heart rate, tense muscles, and a narrow attentional field. When your brain has learned that mistakes equal threat, even the thought of "I might be judged" can trigger that alarm. This maps directly to identity stakes. If your self-evaluation is fused to performance, the amygdala treats critique as belonging risk. The cost feels social and existential, not technical. That's why overplanning soothes. It protects self-image in the short term. Our fix has to decouple worth from work while keeping standards high, safety first, then skill. Now the control loop. Your prefrontal cortex, the planner, tries to soothe that alarm with certainty. When you overplan, you're running a top-down control script. If I predict enough, I'll be safe. It works temporarily because it reduces ambiguity. But the second reality deviates from the plan, an email lands, a scope change pops up, your prediction error spikes. That gap between what I expected and what I'm seeing drives stress. And here's where most people mess up. Instead of adapting, you seek more prediction, more planning, more tools. It's a short-term sedative that delays contact with reality. The thing most people miss is how prediction error ties to the freeze-avoid response. Fight and flight are obvious, but freeze is sneaky. Mentally, it looks like analysis, research, or one more pass. Biologically, it's a conservation move. Minimize exposure until danger passes. When the deadline or audience gets close, the amygdala flags imminent judgment. The prefrontal loop scrambles for control, and the system defaults to the behavior that previously reduced distress: avoid. Let's talk dopamine, because this is the bait. Your brain's reward system releases dopamine not just when you finish, but when you anticipate progress. Planning, organizing, and setting up software all create little micro-anticipations. That's why tweaking a template can feel surprisingly rewarding. The trap is that you get the hit without the risk. Over time, your brain learns, plan equals reward, exposure equals threat. You've trained a loop where preparation is reinforced and publishing is punished. Memory consolidation locks it in. Each time you delay a launch and feel relief, the experience gets encoded, avoidance paired with safety. The more repetitions, the stronger the association. This is classic emotional learning. Your nervous system isn't trying to ruin your career. It's doing exactly what you taught it to do: protect you from uncertainty by narrowing the path to only safe moves. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches. Conscious fear and unconscious threat processing run in parallel. You might tell yourself, "I'm not scared, I'm just being thorough," while your subcortical circuits quietly push you to delay. That mismatch creates cognitive dissonance. You think you're optimizing quality, but the physiology says avoid. Once you recognize the bodily signatures, tight chest near publish time, sudden urge to refine formatting, you can name it for what it is: the circuit firing. Now, before we continue, you need to understand how this becomes a habit. Habits wire when a cue predicts a reliable outcome. Cue, 80% progress and looming exposure. Routine, add scope, make a new checklist, push the date. Reward, relief. That loop is fast, automatic, and feels rational because the prefrontal cortex provides a tidy narrative. We're being strategic. The narrative is the wrapper, the relief is the reinforcer. The game changer is safety learning. Exposure therapy research shows that you don't erase old fear memories, you build new safety memories that inhibit the fear response. Practically, that means small, repeated contacts with evaluation, on your terms, so the amygdala updates. This context isn't lethal. Pair that with prefrontal labeling, naming the specific judgment you fear, and you shrink ambiguity. Less ambiguity equals less amygdala noise. Add a shame resilience layer here. Shame says I am bad. Guilt says the artifact missed the mark. We want guilt-style specificity. 3 moves, speak it. I'm feeling shame. I'm labeling the artifact, not me. Seek a reality check with one trusted reviewer and keep the review behavioral. This section confused me because X. This keeps identity outside the blast radius while you improve the work. Okay, so the tricky part is timing. If you wait until you're at 80%, the circuit is strongest. That's why early micro-exposures matter. Share a rough outline with a friendly reviewer. Post a low-stakes draft to a small group. Each safe exposure is a rep that teaches your nervous system a different outcome, discomfort, then okayness. You're not flooding, you're titrating the dose. Another piece most people miss, attention gating. Under threat, your attentional spotlight narrows to error detection. You start seeing only what's wrong. That's why last-minute editing spirals. To counter that, you can use constrained passes, 1 pass for clarity, 1 for structure, because single target attention reduces overwhelm and lowers perceived threat. The structure itself becomes a safety rail. Let me show you exactly how to spot the circuit in the wild. You'll notice sudden energy for low-impact tasks right before exposure. You'll feel a pull to get more context or see one more example. You'll hear a tidy reason that postpones contact with reality. That is not a signal to think harder. It's a cue to switch modes, from prediction to experiment. The reason this works is simple. You're aligning biology with behavior. Instead of arguing with the amygdala, you give it controlled evidence. Instead of letting the prefrontal cortex spin endless plans, you assign it a narrow job, define the smallest testable unit, and a clear stop time. Instead of letting dopamine reinforce fake progress, you link rewards to shipping and learning, not prepping. If you remember nothing else from this section, remember this: perfectionism runs on a threat prediction relief loop. Detect right arrow, control right arrow, avoid right arrow, relief right arrow, repeat. Break any link and you weaken the loop. Label the threat to lower ambiguity. Limit control behaviors to what increases contact with reality. Replace avoidance with tiny, safe exposures. And redirect reward to the act of shipping and the lesson you extract. Once you see the circuit, you can break it deliberately. The 3 lies of perfectionism. Now that you can see the circuit, let's rip out its beliefs. Perfectionism runs on 3 lies that sound protective but quietly guarantee delay and quitting. I'll give you each lie, why it fails, the better belief, and how to test it this week. One more setup: these lies hook into identity. Perfect protects me really means if I'm flawless, I'm safe to belong. We're not lowering pride, we're moving it from image to evidence, reps, learning, promises kept. That identity shift is why the counter-beliefs stick. Lie 1, perfect protects me. It feels true because polish delays judgment. If there are no visible flaws, there's nothing to attack, right? But here's the thing most people miss: delaying judgment multiplies risk. While you're hiding, uncertainty grows, assumptions harden, and tiny errors turn into expensive rework. The longer you wait, the higher the stakes when you finally ship. That's not protection, that's leverage in the wrong direction. The reason this backfires is the threat loop we covered. Avoidance relieves anxiety, so your brain pairs hide with safe. Meanwhile, reality moves on without your input. Pros don't avoid judgment, they size it and schedule it. Replace it with early feedback protects me. The thing that actually reduces risk is small, frequent exposure. It lets you spot mismatches while they're cheap to fix. Testable counter-belief: if I ship a rough cut to a safe audience within 24 hours, I reduce total errors. How to run it: take your next deliverable and define the smallest shippable unit. A 1-page outline, a 2-slide storyboard, a 15-second demo. Share it with one colleague or a tiny audience. Ask 2 questions only: what's clear? And what's confusing? Log the answers, lock 1 change, and ship the next unit. Notice what happens to rework time and confidence over 3 cycles. Lie 2, I work best under pressure. What you're really saying is, I only start when the fear is high enough to override avoidance. That's not performance, that's panic. Pressure narrows attention to immediate threats, spikes errors, and kills exploration. Yes, urgency can produce output, but it also trains your nervous system to require a cortisol surge to move. Over time, you become deadline-dependent and quality swings wildly. The thing most people miss is that your best thinking often needs low threat and clear constraints, not ambient panic. Replace it with, I work best with constraints. Constraints create clean lanes for attention without triggering the fear circuit. Testable counterbelief. A timed, constrained sprint beats a pressure binge. Here's how to test it. Set a 30-minute build window with 2 constraints, scope and format. Example, write 200 words that answer one user question, no intro, one example. Then a 10-minute clarity pass. Then one exposure, send to a buddy, post to a small channel, or log in a shared doc. Compare error rate, stress, and iteration speed against your last pressure sprint. You'll see fewer cognitive spills and more consistent quality. Lie 3, standards must be high to be proud. Pride doesn't come from ideals, it comes from evidence, reps completed, lessons banked, promises kept. When high standards means perfect before public, you've created a pride tax that's impossible to pay. That's why you feel chronically behind and secretly ashamed. The best performers hold high standards across iterations, not inside a single output. They separate minimum viable excellence from final polish, then they run the ladder. Replace it with, pride comes from reps. Testable counterbelief, 10 shipped versions with clear improvements beat one private masterpiece. Run this, define 3 levels, MVE, minimum viable excellence, V1, V2. MVE is the smallest version that meets the outcome requirement. V1 fixes clarity. V2 adds tone or shine. Commit to shipping MVE in a day, V1 in 3 days, V2 next week. Track a wins ledger. Number of ships, 1 learning per ship, 1 improvement applied. Watch what happens to pride when your identity shifts from I'm perfect to I keep promises and I improve. Now hear us where most people mess up when they try these new beliefs. They keep the old behavior scaffolding. They still allow unlimited passes, fuzzy scopes, and vibe-based quality checks. That invites the circuit back in. So put guardrails around the counterbeliefs. Limit planning to what increases contact with reality. Use checklists with max passes. Tie quality to objective gates, requirements met, confusion reduced, response achieved, not how anxious you feel. A quick micro story. Last week, a client who swore they needed pressure tried 1:30-10-1 sprint with a 2-slide demo to a friendly stakeholder. 0 panic, 2 crisp notes, and a green light to build. They shipped the full draft in 2 days. The difference? They replaced perfect protects me with early feedback protects me, and the relief came from progress, not escape. If you remember nothing else from this section, remember this: beliefs drive behaviors that train your nervous system. Keep the lies and you'll keep reinforcing avoid right arrow relief. Install the counterbeliefs and you'll reinforce ship right arrow learn. And because we're not just swapping ideas, I'll show you the concrete model next. The antifragile approach that bakes these beliefs into your output so you benefit from small errors instead of fearing them.